It's amazing that Nehemiah completed building the walls in only 52 days. And indeed, the Bible presents it as such, not as a miracle, but as a event that showed that God was with Nehemiah. They're rebuilding it. And as you read the story of the rebuilding, isn't it exciting to see how the whole community kicks in and participates, the priests and the non-priests. Now let me also suggest that Nehemiah learns that the enemies of the Jews, in particular a man named Sanballat and Tobiah and Geshem, are plotting against them and even threatening physical violence against them. That does two things. One thing, it takes some men off the work task because they have to protect the wall, but on the other hand, it would certainly motivate them to get that wall up fast. And so we are to see it as not a miracle, but as something which is a wonderful work of God. How are we to look at Ezra Nehemiah and consider its spiritual contribution? First of all, to its own time period, and then secondly, in an eschatological or future-oriented sense. First of all, let's remember that at the time of the Old Testament, God wanted his people to be separate. He wanted his people to stay away from the Gentiles. Not because God didn't care about the Gentiles. God cared about the Gentiles from the very beginning. And if you go back and read Genesis 12, 1 through 3, you see that the promise came to Abraham, not just for Abraham and his descendants, but for all the families of the nations. However, the idea was that God's people would be separate and they would follow God, they would obey him, and God would bless them so much that the Gentiles would look at them and say, "We want to be like them. Let us worship their God." In a sense, you can read Ezra and Nehemiah as a story of two wall buildings, not just one. In a sense, the law, which Ezra comes back and reestablishes, is a law that separates Jew from Gentile, particularly in the laws concerning ritual purity, sacrifice, what we call ceremonial laws today. And then secondly, there's a physical separation from, represented by the building of Nehemiah's wall. Now, we in the New Testament time period are told not to stay separate, but if you read the Great Commission at the end of Matthew 28, we're to go out to the nations. We're to disciple, teach, baptize. And so this is God's plan for us today. The wall of separation has come down. We don't stay back like Ezra and Nehemiah rightly did, but we go out into the nations and we proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ. And now we're seeing in dramatic ways the fulfillment of the promise that God gave to Abraham that there would be a blessing that would go to the Gentiles. An interesting fact is that Ezra and Nehemiah is one of two books, the other being Daniel, that's half written in Hebrew and half written in Aramaic, which is interesting because at the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, Hebrew is beginning to die out as a living language, and Aramaic is taking over. And so there are a whole bunch of features of the text which, as I say, just ring true for that time period. It's interesting that the book of Ezra and Nehemiah contains two large sections which are memoirs. And that's very unusual for the Old Testament. Memoirs are, of course, written in the first person rather than the third person, and both Ezra and Nehemiah have a memoir within it, which gives a reader a sense of you're hearing it from a participant in the events. Not only are Ezra and Nehemiah real people, but their personality comes across in their writings. And I always find it very interesting to see just how different Ezra and Nehemiah are from each other, and how God used both of these personalities for his purposes. Nehemiah is kind of a go-getter. He's kind of an extrovert. He is somebody who, when he has a task, he gets it done. And when he runs into Jewish men who have divorced their wives and remarried pagan women, he goes to them and he starts yelling at them, and he starts ripping their clothes and tearing their hair out and telling them go back to their original wives. Ezra runs into, on a different occasion, a similar group of men, but rather than ripping their hair, he tears his own hair out and he rips his own clothes. And again, sometimes in Christian circles, we say there's only one way of leadership. And I'm not saying anybody tearing out anyone's hair is the way to go today, but God can use both quiet people, more introverted people, as well as outspoken, extroverted people to accomplish his plans.
尼希米是做亚达谢西王的纠正，一听到城墙拆毁，城门被火焚烧，他就有这个负担要回去。为什么他在第1章马上禁食祷告呢？其实历史的背景在于以斯拉记的第4章。过去在解释尼希米记，我们通常要回到列王记下的最后1章。当然最后1章里面提起城墙拆毁的情况，但是近代的学者已经接纳以斯拉记第4章，也就是尼希米记里面很重要的历史。为什么呢？因为同样这位亚达谢西王，他禁止这个耶路撒冷重建，就是这个原因，所以城门被火焚烧。尼希米献上祷告，他献上祷告，向耶和华这位天上的神，这位大而可畏的神献上祷告。尼希米安静等候。尼希米记当中有几个重要神学的主题。第一个主题就是祷告，因为尼希米在第1章其实是一个委身的祷告，他献上祷告，他求主开恩，求主让他很顺利的可以回到耶路撒冷。在第9章当中，尤其在第13章里面有很多向神呼吁，求神纪念，求神恩待。其实这是报道式的一个祷告，我称它是庆祝的祷告。因为像一个学生，当他完成功课的时候，向他的老师说，老师，我已经完成了，神啊，求你纪念我，求你开恩。尼希米当中第2个主题是指明神学的主题，因为在尼希米短短的13章当中有很多名字，里面第3章是修建城墙，他们的名字都写下来。第8章有一些跟以斯拉在一起读神话语的同工在哪里，有一些领袖，有一些利未人。第7章跟以斯拉记的第2章名字是一样的，这群体是第一次归回群体，名单写下来。为什么必须要把第一次回来的群体写下来呢？因为他们正像耶利米先知所传讲，愿意回到耶路撒冷，他们愿意回到神所预备给他们的地方。第10章有一群体，他们也就签下他们的名字，愿意遵行神的话语。第11章有一些名字呢，这些就是愿意住进耶路撒冷，他们愿意遵行神的话语。第12章还很仔细把祭司跟利未人的名字写下来，就是这些服侍 他们当中的这些领导。尼希米当中，我们也看到教导的重要。以斯拉是文士，他很注意神的话语，他对律法、神的 Torah 很注意。第8章里面，他们很谨慎，把以斯拉邀出来，在水门的宽阔处读神的话语，还请利未人仔细把神的话语讲明清楚。尼希米也与以斯拉一起同工，研究以斯拉、尼希米。学术界当中不想把他们两个放在一起，认为他们不可能在一起。但是在尼希米记当中，我们却可以看到第8章有以斯拉的名字，第12章有以斯拉跟尼希米在一起服侍的名单。今天我们已经愿意接纳他们一起同工。尼希米记当中，我们也可以看到尼希米特别关怀一些软弱的，因为历史的背景让利未人很不顺利的在神的行列上面没有办法参与圣工，他们软弱了，回到自己的田地去了。其实最主要是因为那个时候没有关怀他们的需要，所以尼希米在第12章、第13章都特别注意利未人，尤其这些回到自己田地去的人，让他们再次有机会回来。他让他们可以在庆典上面参与庆祝，他们让利未人有机会再次参与神的圣工。其实最主要跟奉献有关，因为在第13章，当他们不小心软弱的当中，有人占用了圣殿的库房。那个时候因为是农业的社会，所以一些这个农业的产品没有地方放的时候，无形中这个奉献也就减少了。尼希米也就处理了这件事，让当得的份可以让利未人可以有机会享用，鼓励这些软弱的利未人参与圣工。
At Spring of Water International Ministries, we invite you to journey with us, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Isaiah 55:10. To find out more, follow Spring of Water International Ministries.